Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're pulling the curtain on something huge in the business world. Mergers and acquisitions. M&A.
It's definitely high stakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not just about crunching numbers on balance sheets. It's really seen as this engine for growth, right? Getting into new markets, maybe grabbing some disruptive tech, bringing in great talent.
Yeah, it's often presented that way, this big driver of business evolution.
And it really can be. But like anything complex, moving at high speed, there's another side to it.
Right. There's that hidden underbelly. Risks that you might not see right away, but boy, can they bite you later if you don't spot them early.
And we're talking specifically about the digital stuff, aren't we? The IT systems, the infrastructure, and maybe the biggest worry today, cybersecurity.
Exactly. Just sort of sailing through due diligence and maybe glossing over the IT and cyber aspects. That's asking for trouble. Big regrets down the line, often very expensive ones.
And that's exactly what we're doing in this deep dive. We're going deep into why cybersecurity due diligence is so incredibly critical in M&A.
We've got a great stack of sources to draw from, too.
We really do. We've got expert guides from Kroll, some deep analysis from Capstone Partners, practical playbooks from places like Optiv and Versprite, insights from a Kraft CPA's article.
A really timely report from Cybersecurity Dive. Even some real-world takes from a Reddit discussion, which is interesting.
Yeah, plus a detailed FR Secure checklist and a white paper from Forward Networks talking about tech like digital twins.
It's a fantastic mix. Gives us a view from all sorts of angles, strategic, technical, financial, the works.
So by the time we wrap this up, you should have a much clearer picture of those hidden digital risks, the key steps to actually uncover them, and really why getting this right is just non-negotiable for making deals work today. I mean, everything's connected, the threats are everywhere.
Think of it as your fast track to getting smart on something super complex but absolutely vital.
Because, let's face it, pretty much every company runs on tech and data now, doesn't it?
It does. And where you have tech and data.
It's got cyber risk. Okay, let's jump right in. Why? Why is this cybersecurity due diligence so essential? Not just a nice to have, but critical.
Well, it really starts with the target company itself. What are you actually buying?
Even if they look great on paper, right? Good revenue, cool products.
Exactly. They could still be carrying these hidden security bombs that you inherit the second you sign the deal. Kroll's guide makes this super clear. These threats aren't always obvious.
Like what kind of hidden threats?
Things like data breaches that happened maybe months or even years ago, but nobody found them. They're just lurking. Or maybe they've been cutting corners on regulatory compliance and it just hasn't blown up yet. It's that stuff under the surface.
And the potential consequences? They sound serious.
They are. Kroll points out, if you find the stuff after the deal closes, you could be looking at massive fines from regulators. Huge damage to your reputation, think customer trust. That takes years to rebuild.
And in the worst cases,
it could actually disrupt the whole point of the M&A or even cause the deal to fail completely. Imagine buying a company and then finding out its main systems are totally compromised or its key data is unusable. The whole strategic reason for buying it just evaporates.
Yeah.
And you're left holding the bag, a very expensive bag.
And this is all happening against a backdrop of, well, the threat landscape just keeps getting worse, doesn't it?
Constantly escalating. Capstone Partners analysis really drives this home. They say critical cyber attacks aren't just some small problem. They're actually a major force shaping the whole cybersecurity market right now.
So that rising tide of threats makes M&A inherently riskier.
Absolutely. The chances of stumbling into a problem are just higher than they were a few years back.
Are there numbers on that?
Yeah, Capstone cites some pretty sobering stats from Astra. Ransomware attacks, for example, the ones that can just shut a business down overnight, they're up 13% over the last 5 years.
13%. Wow.
And the average cost to fix just one ransomware incident, already around $1.9 million. But it's not just how often they happen, it's how bad they are.
How bad?
Cybersecurity Dive reported something staggering based on data from Resilience. The financial severity of ransomware claims how much they actually cost jumped over 400% just between 2022 and 2023.
400% increase.
Yeah. So when attacks hit, they're hitting way, way harder financially.
And here's something that sounds really counterintuitive. The M&A process itself can actually make things riskier.
It can, absolutely. Kroll points this out. Threat actors aren't dumb. They know that during a merger or acquisition, Tons of sensitive data is flying back and forth. And they also know that key employees on both sides are probably stressed, distracted, maybe not as careful about security protocols because they're focused on the deal itself.
Makes them easier targets.
Exactly. More vulnerable to phishing, business email compromise, that kind of thing. The whole M&A timeline creates this temporary window of, well, heightened vulnerability that attackers are definitely looking to exploit.
Then there's the whole interconnectedness issue. You're not just buying one company's problems.
No, you're merging everything. Systems, networks, and often their whole messy web of third-party partners and vendors. That cybersecurity dive report, again using resilience data, highlighted how some really devastating cyber incidents have been linked directly to vulnerabilities found in these interconnected systems, or specifically in companies that were just recently acquired.
So a weak link in the acquired company or even one of their vendors can bring down the whole combined entity.
That's the risk. Attackers exploit that single point of failure to get into the larger organization.
And that vendor risk, it sounds like it's becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the puzzle.
It's huge. The report mentioned vendor-driven claims are the fastest growing category for some insurers. Like 40% of claims so far in 2024 came not from a direct attack, but from a vulnerability in a vendor or supplier.
40%. So when you buy a company, you're basically inheriting the security risk of their entire supply chain.
Pretty much. Could be dozens, even hundreds of other companies you suddenly rely on, indirectly.
Wow. Okay, let's make this real. Is there a big example of this kind of thing happening?
Unfortunately, yes. The United Health Group acquisition of Change Healthcare is a stark one. United Health bought Change for $13 billion back in 2022.
I remember hearing about the attack on Change Healthcare.
Yes.
Huge disruption, right?
Especially in healthcare.
Massive disruption. And the financial fallout for United Health. It just kept climbing. That cybersecurity dive report citing Healthcare Dive mentioned United Health now expects the total financial hit to be somewhere between $2.3 billion and $2.45 billion.
$2.5 billion on a $13 billion acquisition.
Yep, almost 20% of the purchase price gone, directly linked to a cyber attack on the company they bought. It's a brutal example of what can happen if vulnerabilities in the target aren't found or fully appreciated beforehand.
And it's not just about these catastrophic breaches, is it? There are other IT-related M&A headaches, definitely. Craft CPAs and Forward Networks both touch on this. Even if you avoid a massive hack, incomplete or just badly managed IT integration is super common.
What does that lead to?
Things like ongoing productivity loss because systems don't talk to each other. Increased operational costs. Maybe you suddenly find a bunch of old, unsupported devices after the merger that you now have to replace.
And I guess those non-security IT issues can still have a security angle.
Absolutely. If you don't even know what assets you have because your inventory is a mess, how can you secure them? Poorly set up systems are easier to attack. And these operational IT problems often lead straight to legal and regulatory trouble.
Especially if you're combining companies across different countries or states.
Right. Suddenly you're dealing with different data privacy laws, different security rules. Compliance violations often stem from just plain bad IT management, not necessarily malicious intent.
Okay, so all of this just hammers home why this due diligence is so vital. Let's pin down exactly what we mean by cybersecurity due diligence. What does it actually involve?
Kroll's guide is good here. It's way more than just taking the target company's word for it or looking at the documents they decide to share.
It's an independent check.
Yes, a deep, independent review by people who know what they're looking for. It means digging into their risk governance. How do they find, manage, report risks? Evaluating their actual defenses. What tools and processes do they really use day to day? Scrutinizing the controls they have on their critical data and systems.
So getting the real picture, not the sales pitch.
Exactly. Understanding their true threat environment and their actual security posture.
And how does this process actually feed back into the deal itself? How does it affect things?
It gives the buyer critical information and, frankly, leverage for negotiations. Kroll points this out clearly. If you find potential security gaps or know you'll need to spend money on remediation, you can argue for adjustments to the deal price.
Like lowering the price to cover future security costs.
Or setting up an escrow account, maybe? Craft CPAs reinforces this. Identified risks can either be fixed by the seller before closing, or if that's not practical, the estimated cost and the risk itself get factored into the final deal valuation.
So it's basically a value protection thing. It's part of figuring out what the company is truly worth, warts and all.
Precisely. It's not just an expense. It's part of the financial calculation.
And the benefits.
Yeah.
Obviously for the buyer, avoiding future disasters.
Right. Mitigating those future fines, remediation costs, reputation hits. Kroll emphasizes it leads to better informed decisions and protects the value you thought you were buying.
What about the seller? Is there any upside for them?
Surprisingly, yes. If a seller has invested properly in cybersecurity, going through thorough due diligence lets them prove it. Kroll suggests this can actually boost their reputation and maybe even their valuation. They look like a less risky, more buttoned-up target compared to others. A clean cyber report card can be a real asset.
So it's not just about dodging bullets. It's potentially a strategic plus.
Definitely. Kroll lists ways it provides strategic advantage, identifying specific issues that could affect the deal's success, like hidden vulnerabilities, how they handle breaches, their disaster recovery plans, compliance gaps.
And finding this stuff early helps smooth out the whole process.
Yeah, Kroll notes it allows for structured identification and management of issues, preventing nasty surprises later that could delay things or blow up the ROI. It also helps plan for integration, minimizing disruption by knowing where the security weak points are and how to tackle them.
Plus, it shows you're serious about security, which stakeholders care about.
Increasingly so. Investors, customers, regulators, they all want to see that commitment. Which brings us back to that point from the FR Secure checklist.
That cyber due diligence needs the same weight as financial due diligence.
Exactly. You wouldn't skip the financial audits, right? The potential downside is too huge. Well, given that cyber incidents can now cause billions in losses, like we saw with United Health, the potential business impact is right up there with major financial screw-ups. The level of scrutiny needs to match that potential impact.
That really puts it into perspective. Ignoring cyber risk when the cost can be billions.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
It just doesn't stack up anymore.
Okay, this is clearly a complex area, and getting it right often requires specialized help. We want to pause for a moment to thank our sponsors who operate right in this critical space. This deep dive is brought to you with support from www.cyberdiligence.investments. Their experts focus specifically on understanding cyber risk within investment decisions.
And we're also really grateful for the support from www.cyberdealrisk.com. They are a key resource if you're navigating cybersecurity risk, specifically in private equity deals, where getting the integration and risk management right is just so crucial.
All right, so we know why it's essential. We know the value it brings. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the experts actually looking for during this due diligence? What's on the checklist?
This is where we go deep. Multiple sources, Kroll, FR Secure, Craft TPAs, even that Reddit discussion, they all point to a whole range of critical areas. It's about getting a complete picture.
Starting with the basics, security controls and policies. Absolutely. Kroll stresses it's not enough just to read the policy documents. You have to test the effectiveness of their key controls. Are their incident response plans actually workable? Tested? Are firewalls configured right? How tight are their access controls really? Are intrusion detection systems actually monitored and doing their job?
And the policies themselves.
Yeah.
They're the foundation, right?
They are, as Kroll says. But like that Reddit comment highlighted, the real gold is finding the gaps between the written policy and what actually happens day to day. Are people following the rules? Is the documentation way out of date? Checking adherence is key.
Compliance is another big one you mentioned, and it sounds complicated.
It is, because the rules change so much depending on the industry, where they operate, what kind of data they handle. Kroll emphasizes assessing how well they comply with all the relevant legal, regulatory, industry stuff.
Like GDPR for Europe, HIPAA for healthcare in the U.S.
Exactly. DORA for finance in the EU, ISO 27001 as a general standard, PCI DSS for credit cards. Due diligence needs to figure out which ones apply and check compliance.
And the FR Secure checklist adds more checks.
Yeah, practical stuff like, have they ever been fined before? Are they under any current regulatory orders, like from the FTC? Do they have certifications like ISO 27001 or SOC reports? Because the buyer might need to maintain those or update their scope.
And that critical point FR Secure made about inheriting new regulations.
Yes. Super important. Buying a company doesn't just mean they adopt your standards. You, the buyer, might suddenly be subject to their regulations based on their location or business. Buy a European company. Hello, GDPR compliance for that entity. Buy a healthcare provider. You now have HIPAA obligations for that part of the business. It's a major compliance risk transfer.
Okay, what about their ability to handle an actual incident?
Crucial. Kroll talks about assessing their readiness to identify, respond, and recover. What are their reporting mechanisms? Are their plans current and practiced? FR Secure specifically calls out reviewing their incident response plan, their business continuity plan, and their disaster recovery plan. Basically, how quickly can they get back up and running after a hit?
and their overall approach to managing risk.
You need to evaluate their whole risk management framework. Kroll covers looking at their processes for assessing risk, how they identify threats, what mitigation strategies they use, and how they monitor and report on risk.
Secure had some good questions there, too.
Yeah, like, when was their last big risk assessment? Who actually saw the results? And critically, what did they do about the findings? You need to understand how actively they manage risk, or if they just do assessments that sit on a shelf. It helps you gauge the real risk profile you're inheriting.
What about the core technology? The hardware, software, networks?
Fundamental. Kraft CPAs and Secure both mention assessing all that. Are systems up to date? Still supported by the vendor? You need a plan for anything obsolete or unsupported that's a security hole waiting to happen. How standardized is their stuff? Do they use managed service providers for key things like infrastructure or security monitoring? Need to check those out too.
Asset inventory. You mentioned that's often a mess.
It really is. Secure says you need to try and inventory everything. Physical gear, like servers and laptops. Logical stuff, like data and apps. Software licenses, legacy code, even how they manage source code. And remember that forward networks stat. Over half of tech leaders find rogue devices after integration. Forgotten servers. Unauthorized cloud stuff. Big risks.
Data management is huge, too, especially with privacy laws.
Absolutely. Kraft CPAs and Secure stress understanding how they manage data securely. Where is it stored? How do they comply with GDPR, CCPA, etc.? Who actually owns the data, especially if you're only buying part of the company? Secure also adds assessing data flow. How does it move? Is it encrypted when stored? Where are backups kept? Cloud, tape, are they secure? Tested.
Access controls seem basic but important.
Foundational. Secure asks, is it strict need-to-know access, or is it looser, where lots of people have broad permissions? Tells you a lot about their internal security culture and potential insider risk.
And physical security still counts.
Definitely. Secure reminds us to look at facilities, data centers, on-prem, cloud, colo, access controls for buildings and critical areas like server rooms, basic safety stuff too.
Contracts are another than to check.
Yes. Kraft CPAs mentions analyzing IT contracts. You might inherit expensive long-term deals, bad licensing terms, or clauses that make integration harder. Need to know those obligations.
And third-party risk. You said that's a headline issue now.
It really is. Kroll and Secure both flag the huge potential problems from suppliers, vendors, consultants, anyone external with access.
Kroll says a vulnerability in just one vendor can lead to a breach.
Directly. Can cause data loss, IP theft, major disruption for the combined company. Secure strongly advises reviewing the target's vendor management program. Do they even have one? How good is it? Do they assess the risk of their critical vendors? You need to know, because you're inheriting that risk too.
And of course, you're looking for actual breaches, right?
Yeah.
Ones they might not even know about.
Absolutely critical. Kroll lists actively looking for signs of current or past unknown breaches. Finding one during due diligence is painful, but finding one after you close is infinitely worse.
Okay. Another hidden threat you mentioned was technical debt. Sounds bad.
It is. A&M details this well. It's not always seen as purely security, but it has massive security implications. It's basically the result of taking shortcuts in the past, using old tech, bad code, poor architecture, skipping maintenance.
Like building a house cheaply and paying for it later with constant repairs.
Great analogy. A&M says it impacts valuation, higher costs, less scalable, creates operational risks, unpatchable vulnerabilities, compliance failures, makes integration a nightmare, incompatible systems, undocumented code, and even makes separating businesses harder and more expensive.
So tackling technical debt needs its own process.
Yeah, A&M says comprehensive diligence to find it, prioritizing what to fix, planning for it post-close, and ongoing management. It's a persistent problem.
And finally, Versprite brought in this idea of a multidimensional risk landscape. What's that about?
It's about looking beyond just the tech security. They argue you need a broader view.
Broader how? What other dimensions?
They talk about political risk. Think regulatory environments, government relations, political stability in the target's markets, compliance rules across different countries, potential conflicts after the merger.
So the political climate where a company operates affects its cyber risk.
Increasingly, yes. Geopolitics and cyber risk are intertwined. Versprite also mentions socioeconomic risk, market stability, supply chain vulnerabilities beyond just vendor security, social factors in new regions, and critically, cultural integration risks.
Cultural risks. How does culture impact security?
Hugely. If the acquiring company has a very strict security culture and the target is more move fast and break things, just mashing them together without addressing that clash creates massive security gaps. Differing views on risk tolerance, security practices, it matters a lot. Technical controls can't fix a culture clash.
Wow, okay. That really broadens the scope. It's not just firewalls and patches, it's culture, politics, economics. Much more complex picture.
It absolutely is.
So with all these different facets to check, how does this actually fit into the M&A timeline? It's not a one-shot deal, is it?
Definitely not. It's a process. Kroll explains the specifics depend on the deal, the target, complexity. But generally, it's phased pre- and post-transaction. Optiv breaks it down into readiness, due diligence, execution, and post-close. FR Secure simplifies it nicely, before, during, and after the deal.
Okay, let's use that flow. Phase 1, before the deal, like Optiv's readiness stage.
Exactly. The goal here is early assessment. Identifying targets, doing initial checks, getting a feel for the potential cyber risks before you commit serious resources. Optiv and FR Secure mentioned doing an initial risk assessment based on size, complexity, compliance needs. Kroll adds evaluating their current controls at a high level, thinking about likely risk scenarios for their industry.
What else happens?
Kroll suggests looking at their external digital footprint, any obvious public weaknesses. Checking dark web exposure. Reviewing their cyber insurance. FR Secure adds understanding their general risk profile, when their last assessment was, checking for public breach reports, thinking about legal dependencies, past fines or certs, initial data ownership questions, and anticipating those new regulations you might inherit.
And Optiv's role here is strategic advice.
Yeah, flagging key risks early, thinking about the potential impact on the deal, and helping the buyer set guiding principles for security throughout the M&A process. It's about scoping the problem.
Okay, then phase 2, during the deal, the main due diligence and execution part.
This is the real deep dive. Goal: thoroughly understand the target systems and posture. This informs the final price in negotiations and gathers info needed for integration planning. A&M stresses doing the thorough technical due diligence now. Optiv focuses on the detailed research and analysis.
FR Secure says this is where you learn the ins and outs.
Pretty much. Activities ramp up, reviewing those key plans in detail. Incident response, business continuity, disaster recovery, vendor management.
Building that asset inventory.
Or reviewing theirs, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to get it as complete as possible, figuring out access controls, digging deep into the tech infrastructure, standardization, legacy systems, data flows, backups, patching, AV, third-party connections, physical security. FR Secure's checklist gets really granular here.
Optiv helps with negotiations and day one planning during this phase.
Right. Supporting security-specific negotiation points, helping quantify risks for the deal terms, and, crucially, planning for seamless day one security coverage for the acquired entity. A&M adds that dealing with high-priority technical debt often happens here too, if remediation before closing is feasible.
Got it. And finally, phase 3. After the deal. Post-close transition and integration. Sounds just as important.
It is, maybe even more so. The goal now is secure integration, or sometimes separation, aligning policies, setting a new combined baseline, and managing the ongoing shared risk. Optiv talks about executing the transition plan and reducing inherited risks during integration.
What does Kroll suggest for post-close?
Things like immediately assessing IT hygiene in the acquired entity, looking for compromises that might have happened during the transition chaos, developing unified policies and standards for the new combined company. They also recommend things like penetration testing the integrated environment.
Acting as a virtual CISO, maybe. Helping with ongoing risk.
Yeah, Kroll offers services like that guiding incident response, evaluating operational risk around shared IP or data, building combined third-party risk programs.
And FR Secure's after checklist is pretty detailed, too.
Very much so. It emphasizes ongoing stuff, reviewing governance for the combined entity, aligning security and HR policies, communicating changes to all employees, getting acknowledgments, training everyone on the new rules, conducting ongoing checks to establish the new baseline security level.
And keeping things up to date.
Absolutely. Making sure people follow the rules, prioritizing ongoing training, getting an annual validated risk assessment for the whole combined entity, and being ready to act on those results, updating audit plans, certification scopes, talking to external auditors.
Versprite focuses on tailored integration roadmaps post-merger.
Right. prioritizing remediation, integrating security architectures, harmonizing compliance, aligning cultures, coordinating incident response, ongoing optimization, and support.
And A&M reminds us technical debt doesn't just disappear post-close.
No, it needs strategic planning for integration or separation, and crucially, ongoing monitoring and management. It's a long-term effort.
Okay, clearly a massive undertaking with lots of places to trip up. What are the common challenges? And how can experts or tech help?
Kroll is up front. It's not easy. A huge pitfall. Time pressure. M&A deals move fast. Not giving security due diligence enough time is a major risk for missing things.
Rushing it leads to oversights.
Definitely. Another risk is not assessing all the areas we just talked about. Just doing tech scans, but ignoring policy, compliance, vendors, culture. You miss crucial weaknesses or even existing breaches.
And focusing only on pre-merger issues.
Yeah, Kroll flags that too.
Yeah.
Ignoring the post-merger integration risks is dangerous. That's often when things go wrong if you haven't planned for it based on the diligence findings.
And technical debt is just this underlying headache complicating everything.
Exactly. A&M highlighted how it makes diligence harder, integration harder, leads to hidden costs, delays. It's a tangled mess.
How do you tackle it then?
A&M's approach mirrors the overall theme. Detailed diligence just to find it. Prioritizing fixes based on risk, planning strategically to deal with it post-close, and managing it continuously.
Which sounds like a lot. Explaining why people bring in outside help.
Precisely. Craft CPAs really emphasizes collaborating with external IT experts and advisors for a smooth, secure transition.
What do these experts bring to the table?
Specialized knowledge and experience that internal teams, frankly, often lack in the M&A pressure cooker. They spot patterns, identify gaps quickly, offer independent insight on impact and fixes. They help with risk assessments, audits, strategic guidance. Craft CPA says they uncover those hidden pitfalls and assess if the target's tech can actually scale or integrate well.
So getting an objective view and a solid plan.
Exactly. That Reddit thread also mentioned external support is often seen as good practice for liability and governance, especially if you're juggling multiple deals. They bring methodology, objectivity, scale.
And technology itself can help too, particularly with the data problem.
Yes. Forward Networks makes a strong case here. A huge challenge in M&A integration is just not having accurate current info about the target's network. You can't secure or merge what you don't understand.
Their solution is this digital twin idea, like a virtual model of the network.
Exactly. A living, interactive model of their whole network, on-prem, cloud, everything. It provides current, detailed info that static documents just can't match. Helps merge networks faster and safer, takes out a lot of the guesswork.
How does it specifically help with M&A network assessment and integration?
Several ways. First, dynamic inventory. Instead of old spreadsheets, it pulls live data to build a real-time map of everything across different vendors. A searchable network database.
Visualization helps too, I imagine, especially with complex merged networks.
Hugely. It visualizes the entire topology, layer 2 through 4, in one view. Forward Networks points out that often only a few people really understand how a network actually works. It's tribal knowledge. The twin makes that visible, verifiable.
And understanding traffic flow, checking security paths.
The twin can simulate all possible traffic paths. You can see how data should flow and critically check that it can't go where it shouldn't. Huge for verifying connectivity and security after merging, especially with tricky stuff like overlapping IPs needing NAT.
Can it check security policies directly?
Yeah, using what Forward Networks calls intent checks. You define your desired security rules like segmentation, and the twin automatically finds configurations in the target network that violate those rules, pinpoints non-compliance.
What about finding vulnerabilities?
It integrates with vulnerability databases like NIST and scanners like Rapid7, Tenable. It finds known CVEs on the target network and, crucially, helps prioritize what to fix first. It can even show which vulnerable systems are internet exposed or reachable from less trusted zones, focuses your efforts.
And verifying that crucial network segmentation.
It gives you a clear matrix view, often color-coded. Green for open, orange for filtered, gray for no route, red for isolated. You see instantly if your zone-to-zone security posture is what it should be. Visual verification of segmentation compliance.
So tools like a digital twin really cut through the fog, give you that single source of truth for the network, much like financial models do for the finance side.
Exactly that. Giving the IT and security teams that level of detailed, verifiable data is just as vital for successful M&A risk reduction as giving the finance team accurate models. It turns that uncertainty into actionable insight.
We really hope this deep dive has given you valuable perspective on this critical M&A element. And again, we want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. Thanks to www.cyberdiligence.investments, who are dedicated to helping investors make informed decisions by really understanding cyber risk.
And our sincere appreciation also goes to www.pcyberdealrisk.com, your go-to resource if you're in private equity and need specialized insights for navigating the unique cybersecurity challenges in your deals.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit from the diligence process itself and look at the broader market context. What's happening in cybersecurity M&A overall? Capstone Partners had some analysis on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Capstone notes that while 2023 saw a dip in deal volume.
Down about 18-19%.
Right, but the market seems to be recovering. Activity so far in 2024 is actually up around 13.6% year over year, so signs of a comeback.
What's driving that recovery?
According to Capstone, it's largely those two big forces we've been talking about. The relentless rise in critical cyber attacks creating demand for solutions, and the big push towards integrating AI and machine learning into security products. That's seen as the next big thing in defense.
They mentioned the Rubrik IPO as an example.
Yeah, Rubrik focuses heavily on ransomware protection, uses AI. They had a strong IPO, even though they weren't profitable. Shows investors are really betting on demand for solutions tackling these specific, high-impact threats.
And are we seeing bigger deals in the space?
Capstone highlights that too. A noticeable rise in deals over $1 billion in enterprise value. 10 of those just through year-to-date 2024, which is a significant uptick.
Who's doing these billion-dollar deals mainly?
Private equity is a big player. PE platform acquisitions make up a good chunk of these large deals. Even with higher interest rates, PE firms are still active, often using cash for take-privates. Shows they see fundamental value and opportunity for consolidation in cyber.
Any examples?
Capstone points to Thoma Bravo's big all-cash deals for Everbridge and Darktrace. Multi-billion-dollar examples showing sponsors are willing to pay up for scale and potential in this sector.
What about venture capital? Is money flowing into startups?
VC funding is up year over year too, according to Capstone, quite significantly actually, though still below the crazy peaks of 2021-2022. A big draw for VCs right now is AI adoption in cybersecurity startups.
How does that VC activity tie back into M&A?
Well, Capstone suggests that with the IPO market still a bit choppy, VCs might increasingly see strategic acquisitions selling their portfolio companies to bigger players or PE firms as a more reliable way to get returns for their investors.
So M&A becomes the exit strategy.
Potentially a more attractive one in the current climate. Capstone gives examples like Wiz raising huge funds partly for acquisitions, new AI-focused startups like Apex Security getting seed funding, and then established players like Nobi4, backed by Vista Equity, buying VC-backed egress. Shows that whole ecosystem dynamic VCs fund innovation. M&A provides liquidity and scale.
So this busy M&A market in cybersecurity, driven by threats and AI, funded by PE and strategics, it just reinforces how valuable these companies are perceived to be.
Absolutely.
And that high value makes the need for really solid due diligence even more critical, right?
Yeah.
You need to understand exactly what you're buying and protect that big investment from those hidden cyber risks.
It all ties together. The market context just underscores the importance of everything we've discussed.
Okay, let's bring this all home for you, the listener.
Yeah.
If you're involved in investments, M&A, or even just running the tech side of a business, what's the big takeaway here?
I think the core message is cybersecurity due diligence is not some optional technical sideshow in an M&A deal. It's absolutely fundamental. It's about protecting value, mitigating potentially massive risks, and frankly, ensuring the strategic goals of the deal can actually be met.
And it's not just a pre-deal checklist.
No way. It has to span the entire M&A lifecycle from the very first assessment before you even make an offer, right through the deep dive during negotiations, and crucially, into the post-close integration and ongoing management. It's continuous.
The stakes are just incredibly high if you get it wrong.
Immense. Failure means you could be inheriting crippling costs from hidden breaches, technical debt, compliance failures. You're exposing the newly combined company to bigger, more complex threats, especially through vendor connections. And ultimately, you could completely undermine why you did the deal in the first place. A potential win turns to a huge loss.
So the key is being proactive.
Absolutely. Identify and tackle these risks early. Don't be afraid to bring in external experts if your team doesn't have deep M&A-specific security chops. And consider leveraging advanced tools like that digital twin concept to get real clarity, especially on complex technical environments.
Hopefully this deep dive gives you the knowledge to ask the tough questions, push for that necessary level of scrutiny, and really understand why this process matters so much today.
It's about recognizing how deeply intertwined the technical security, the operational reality, and the financial outcome of any M&A deal really are now.
The digital foundation isn't separate anymore. It is a core part of the business value and risk.
Precisely.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to chew on. In a world where M&A deals seem to be accelerating, always pushing to close faster, driven by market pressures, and at the same time, AI is becoming this double-edged sword, a tool for better defense and faster, smarter attacks.
Yeah, that's a real tension.
How is that sheer speed and the growing complexity, especially with AI in the mix, going to impact our ability to do truly thorough, multi-dimensional cybersecurity due diligence in the future? Is there a fundamental conflict brewing between deal velocity and genuine cyber resilience that businesses and investors really need to start confronting head on?